Welcome to Madame Raven's. This way to the library. She's been expecting you.
The sequel to The Butt of the Joke. It's all a joke to her. By WritingAmbition. It's all a joke to her. I hope I'm losing my mind. I really do. I don't think this is what you want to read, but truly hope I am losing my mind. I won't be able to handle this otherwise. It's ironic because when I first posted my story, I was scared people were going to think I was crazy. That I was twisting facts out of proportion and imagining demons where there was only heartbreak. I didn't want to be laughed at, ignored, or treated as a joke. Instead, this community really came through and showed me the support I needed. And I can only thank you for your kind comments and suggestions. I was at my wit's end, and your messages gave me hope. So it's only fair that I give you an update on my situation. As I've mentioned before, I am being... I don't even know if haunted is the correct word for it. Who ever heard of a ghost that comes out of a Halloween poster? Well, regardless of how you want to call my apparition, that's how she came to be. By comparison, the first few days were not that bad. I would wake up every morning to see that woman standing beside my bed, looking down at me with that creepy smile that stretched from ear to ear, her eyes unblinking and aimed at me. Though she never said a word, I could tell that she knew just how scared she made me. Not only that, I could tell that she enjoyed my discomfort immensely. It was horrifying, but now I almost miss those simpler times because since then, things have gotten much worse. And Tarek? Really, I don't think I did him justice when I first told you about what happened. He was a good boyfriend, and he did try to be supportive when it all began. And at a certain point, I think he actually believed me. Not at first. When I cracked my eyes open and saw her for the first time, honestly, I felt as if my heart was going to jump out of my mouth. She was clever, though, and faded away in the blink of an eye, just giving me enough of a glimpse to startle me and make me wonder what had just happened. Once she was gone, however, my rational mind took over and immediately explained the whole thing as some kind of lucid dream. I mean, it makes sense, didn't it? Just a picture of that woman with her dead eyes and a wide, toothy grin that seemed ready to eat me whole had clearly caused an impression. It was only natural that I would see her standing beside my bed, looking down on me like some sort of ghost. When that had been the prank I'd been trying to pull on Tarek the night before. I didn't mention her to Tarek until the third morning when he woke up to find me hyperventilating, pale and wide eyes, as I stared at the now empty space in the corner of our room where the woman had stood. That woman from the poster? I think I'm seeing her. He thought I was joking, obviously. And even though it's tempting to be angry at him, one couldn't really blame him for being skeptical. Yeah, right, the lady on the poster I'd brought home to try and scare him had become alive and left the poster to start haunting our house. Sure, that was totally believable. On the fifth day, though, Tarek couldn't ignore me anymore. That morning I had my face buried in my pillow and didn't bother opening my eyes when I heard the alarm. Hell, the woman wasn't even in my mind. I'd managed to forget what was waiting for me for just a moment as I fumbled for my phone in the dark. That was when my fingers brushed against long, oily strands of hair. I knew what it was. I didn't want to admit it to myself, but I just knew it. I opened my eyes to find her eyes right above me, my fingers tangled in her hair as she bent over me, mouth opening slowly as if she was getting ready to take a bite out of me. That was when I knew that this was not a dream. This wasn't a trick of the light or sleepy brain imagining things. I could feel her hair around my fingers. I could see the sparks of insanity in her eyes. It was only when I noticed the sharpness of her teeth that I screamed. I screamed loud enough to jolt Tarek awake. Just like that, she vanished. She was here, I sobbed, quickly descending into hysterics. The woman was here. She was just here. Tarek had never seen me like this. I was usually a well-tempered one out of the two of us. I wasn't given to bursts of uncontrollable emotion. And that was definitely not that good of an actress. That I could still be pulling my stupid prank on him. This time he kept his mouth shut and held me while I cried, trying to calm me down. Now, I've mentioned before that Tarek is a superstitious man, but that doesn't mean he's blind to all logical thought. Before we could even consider the idea of a ghost in our home, we explored the most obvious conclusion together. It was entirely possible that this was nothing but my imagination acting out. Touching the woman's hair didn't mean much, as my brain was more than capable of making me think that the sensation was real when it was nothing but a vivid memory. I could also be suffering from sleep paralysis. That wasn't too uncommon. Neither of us could explain how the woman had vanished from the picture. Honestly, I think he still believes I made that bit up, even though Carolina confirmed that there had been a woman in the poster that I had torn to pieces the week before. Tarek and I talked it through and decided I should talk to a doctor. But that didn't mean we would be taking any chances while we waited for the results. We tried a myriad of solutions, some of which you guys would later suggest to me in the comments. Trying to talk to her was the first step. Since Tarek never caught a glimpse of her, I had to do it by myself the following morning. I asked her, "What do you want from me?" over and over until I was shouting at her placid yet menacing face. She never answered. She simply stared at me for a long time, unmoving and unblinking, until Tarek stirred awake and asked, "Alicia, you okay?" Of course, there were mornings when he woke up before me, and there was even a night where he stayed up to see if he could glimpse the woman, but she always found a way around him. That particular day, when I opened my eyes, I saw Tarek sitting in the corner of the room, looking at his phone for a moment, then surveying the room. I thought we had frustrated her plan, possibly scared her for good, only for my eyes to fall on my closet door. I had left it ajar, and looming from the darkness, I could see her pearly white smile slowly stretching like a demonic Cheshire cat. Her eyes were icy blue, but in the shadows, they resembled two black holes that sparkled with cruelty. The entity I was dealing with was clever enough to find a way around Tarek. She'd come to me through cracks in the doors, reaching out her hand from under the bed to brush her cold fingers against me, waiting for Tarek to be gone before standing at the foot of our bed. By the end of the third week, I attacked her. I didn't plan for it. It was a decision born out of anger and sleep deprivation, since I'd barely managed a solid 2 hours rest every night, because I was dreading the moment I'd see her in the morning. That particular night, I hadn't slept at all. But that had changed nothing. She came to me same as before. I jumped out of bed, ready to pull her hair off her freaking scalp. I mean, she was a physical being, wasn't she? I had touched her hair only weeks before. By all accounts, I should be able to beat the living crap out of her. As you can imagine, she vanished into thin air the moment I tried to touch her, and I collided with the wall, getting nothing but bruises out of the attempt. I remember thinking then that, well, at least she wasn't really material, so she couldn't hurt me. I had touched her hair, but that had been an anomaly. She could do me no harm. I was very wrong about that. But more on that in a moment. That afternoon, as I held an ice pack to my arm, Tarek called his mother. I've never had the impression that she liked me very much. I think she saw me as the reason why her elder son had decided to stay in Toronto after he'd finished college, instead of going back home to his parents and siblings in Saudi Arabia. The last thing she needed was another reason to dislike me. Still, she was the only person we knew who was well-versed in the subject of the supernatural. Tarek had mentioned the stories she'd told him growing up, of ghosts and jinn that had haunted her house, and her mother, who, according to her, had been cursed with the ability to talk to the dead. I thought these things were quite taboo in your religion, I had told them once. At one time I remember being quite skeptical of the whole thing. Tarek had shrugged. Well, she doesn't speak of it to just anyone. But she always said I should be aware of it. Demons can lead people astray. In rapid Arabic, they went back and forth. Tarek explaining, as he later translated to me, that he felt there was a dark presence in the house. He didn't mention the smiling lady, nor the fact he really hadn't seen any of it, leaving it as vague as possible. I know what you're saying, she told him, nodding gravely from his phone screen. I've seen this before. Tarek nodded back, taken aback at how easy it had been to convince her. Okay, he said cautiously, and how do we clean the house or whatever? Have you brought anything new into the house? An old object, an amulet perhaps? Tarek glanced at me when I asked, what? He translated his mother's question. Well, tell her about the picture. He hesitated. Gorgeous? I really don't think you brought a dark and evil spirit into this house by means of a dollar store Halloween poster. I insisted, and he relented. His mother was rather adamant that the picture couldn't simply gain life, and if there was anything in our house, it had probably been there long before we moved in. Tarek wouldn't confirm it, but judging by her tone of voice, she thought I was being ridiculous. So we couldn't have carried a demon into this house through a... No, this type of thing doesn't happen, she said. If that picture changed in any way, then something was already in your house and made it change. She talked of jinn and demons, then recommended that we talk to the imam. He would know what to do. Tarek sheepishly asked the imam at mosque he sparsely frequented to inspect our house. The older, bespectacled man looked around, then asked if Tarek prayed every day. Yeah, sort of, he said. Then he asked if I had a history of mental illness in my family. When I said yes, my father suffered from mild depression and anxiety. He said that he couldn't see or feel anything out of the ordinary, and that praying more frequently might bring us peace. Most times, though, he said, not unkindly, these things are just in our heads. It would be wise for you to talk to a doctor. After the imam, there was a priest from the nearest church we could find, then a rabbi Carolina put us in contact with. It was like the setup for a stupid joke. An imam, a rabbi, and a priest walk into a haunted house to silently judge the crazy woman who lives there. We had the house blessed by every possible holy man and woman we could find. They smoked up the house with incense and sage. Then they went on to chant, shout, or rant until they were ready to declare that the house was now clean. It never really was. Not only was I still waking up at the sight of that woman, but she also seemed to be delighted at the commotion she was causing. Finally, after 2 months of getting nowhere and of waking up to me crying every morning, Tarek gave up on the supernatural and put all his hopes in the doctor I'd been seeing every other week. Never mind that talking about my feelings and my relationship with my mother every fortnight hadn't been helping at all, nor the pills that my psychiatrist recommended had no effect over the situation whatsoever. It was our very last chance. I won't bore you with the details of the next couple of months. It was a long list of prescriptions I kept taking, then switching when things didn't improve, being endlessly bounced from one doctor to the next while watching my relationship with Tarek deteriorate. Meanwhile, the woman came to me every morning, as if the pills I were taking and the fact that Tarek barely looked at me anymore was a great source of amusement for her. That was when we decided to move. I don't know why I thought that would help. I'd slept at hospitals twice for exams in the past few months, and that hadn't helped at all. I suppose I just had to be sure. Moving was costly and took us to the other side of Toronto, and my boyfriend resented me for it. We hadn't even unpacked the dishes when I saw her again. Of course she had followed us. She'd never been latched to the house. She'd latched herself to me. Not even a month after moving, I quit the pills and the therapy. A few days later, Tarek left me. He claimed he couldn't watch myself spiraling out of control and refusing to seek the help I needed. I resented him a lot for that. Then I didn't. Perhaps I would have done the same thing in his place. It still sucked, though. It hurt not to have my boyfriend with me, telling me that I was not insane and that everything was going to be okay. I know our relationship was far from perfect towards the end, but I still wish he'd stuck around. The loneliness was unbearable. With him out of the apartment, the entity became bolder. She started pulling my blankets and standing closer than before, without actually touching me. She cackled in the dark, a deep, throaty sound that was drenched in cruelty. If this was all real, if it wasn't really insane, then I thought I would surely go mad if I had to endure all of this alone. Which is why I came to you and told you my story. I wasn't really looking for an answer at first. My previous attempt at Googling a solution hadn't really led me anywhere. I just needed to get it all off my chest, you know? Even if everyone laughed or said I was clearly insane, the fact that so many people in this community came together to give me hope was truly touching. And I wish I could tell you that you rescued me. I wish I could tell you that you saved my life and my sanity. That would have been a better ending. Wrapped neatly in a bow, reality, however, is quite different. As you can see, I already tried most of your suggestions, but there was a couple of ideas that stood out to me. I'm sorry to say it wasn't the cookies. Trying to leave her a plate of treats overnight to see if she was only hungry resulted in said plate being loudly crashed against the wall. I guess she doesn't like raisins. No, the two ideas that stood out to me, and that it did produce some sort of result, were rather simple. The first was a suggestion, perhaps made in mockery, that I should get used to it. That angered me for a moment, because I had tried just getting used to her presence. It was simply impossible. Despite the fact she was there every time I woke up, her behavior was unpredictable. She could be quietly waiting in the corridor, or shove her ugly, toothy mouth in my face, or cackle manically, just as my eyes began to flutter open. I always knew she was there, but that didn't mean her presence had become predictable or tolerable. However, the person went on to suggest that I give her a name. Karen, they said, because that was a proper name for an annoying white lady. I hadn't smiled in months, but that quirked the corners of my mouth up and squeezed the tiniest giggle out of me. Short as that might have been, it felt good to almost laugh. I'd been melancholy for months. For once, Karen didn't look as scary. Not when I pictured her grinning, turning to a perpetual frown as she screamed, "I demand to speak to your manager!" I wondered if I could truly get used to her. If I could turn her into a joke until she was nothing more than a nuisance in the back of my mind. The following day, I woke up at 4 a.m., my bedroom cold and dark, the soft sound of her laughter bringing me out of my slumber. That morning, she had chosen to hide in my closet again, her laughter echoing from the darkness and reaching my ears as if she were inviting me in, inviting me to come to her. Her eyes came through the shadows. She looked more manic than ever, and my courage faltered. I wanted to look away or scream. Instead, I said, "I see you back there, Karen." It wasn't as confident as you might think. My voice was shaking, and I think I stammered through the words. Still, it wasn't the crying or the screaming or the hysterics that Karen had grown used to, and I might be reading too much into it, but I think that bothered her. I heard her emit a low, growling sound that I had never heard before as she faded into the dark. I'm not going to say that I was feeling confident or hopeful. So much had failed before that I'd become cautious when it came to hoping. However, I had never seen her drop that smile so quickly. Karen had a name now, something less ominous than the apparition or the grinning woman. While that didn't make everything okay or even easier, it gave me a new tactic to focus on. For the next 4 days, I greeted her every morning with the same sense of dread, but a semi-cheerful "Good morning, Karen," that seemed to send her back into the dark a little faster. By the end of the week, she wasn't even smiling anymore, which didn't make her look any less menacing, but made me think that possibly, hopefully, she would get bored of me and move on to another victim. That was the day I set up the nanny cam. You see, someone else suggested that I try to capture her on video, which was something I had briefly considered months ago but discarded. The video would probably be blank, or she would simply show up somewhere the camera wasn't pointing at. At this point, though, I was feeling a little more confident and thought it wouldn't hurt to try. After all, I'd already gone through every possible idea that had crossed my mind. For freak's sake, I'd left my ghost a plate of cookies. I bought a fancy nanny cam online, the kind that could record for 10 hours on a full battery and upload the video straight into the cloud. I'd be able to check the video on my phone first thing in the morning. I set the camera up on my bookcase, which gave it a wide view of my bedroom, including the closet door, which I'd left wide open. I checked the feed on my phone. There were blind spots where Karen could and likely would show up. But for now, that was the best plan I had. I fell asleep after tossing and turning in bed, the way I usually did. Midnight quickly becoming 1 in the morning, then 2, until I stopped glancing at my clock and felt myself slipping into unconsciousness. Contrary to what you might think, I don't have nightmares. Sleep had just become a fickle thing, And in the rare night I might have get 5 hours of sleep, I still feel as if I just blinked my eyes for a moment and got no relaxation whatsoever. When I woke up 6 hours later, I felt drowsy, as if emerging from a long hibernation that had dulled my senses into a pleasant laziness. Everything felt different, and it took me a minute to understand why. Karen was nowhere to be seen. No, it couldn't be. She had to be playing a trick on me, I thought. The answer to my prayers couldn't be that simple. Was it possible that the camera had scared her away? Or perhaps it was my apparent indifference to her. Regardless of what it was, I reached for my phone before even getting out of bed. I swiped my finger around, downloaded the footage of the last 6 hours, and started watching it with bated breath. Honestly, I thought the video would be blank, or that I'd just see myself snoring for 6 hours. I fast-forwarded to the point where I'd fallen asleep and waited, thinking that if I had indeed captured anything, it would show up towards the end. I was wrong. I was wrong about everything. Someone slipped into the frame 20 minutes after I'd fallen asleep. I could tell that it wasn't Karen because the woman in the video was shorter and rounder. Besides, I had no idea how Karen came into my room, but I didn't think it was by dragging her feet and slowly moving to the side of my bed. She had her back to the camera as she stood beside me, my own face buried into the pillow. Her shoulders were slumped and her blonde hair was a mess. Unlike Karen's rags, her clothes were lighter, girlier, familiar. The pieces slid into place in my mind. My heart began thumping in my chest. Still, I refused to admit to myself until the woman turned around and gave the camera full view of her face. I began to cry. The face on the camera was mine, or at least it looked like mine, but those eyes were not my own. They were sunken and angry, pale like death but dark and deep like endless tunnels. And that smile, that was her smile. Her manic, hungry, toothy grin plastered onto my own face, where it didn't belong. Despite knowing that it couldn't possibly be me, I held on to hope that perhaps I was only sleepwalking. But I wasn't. The real me, the one who didn't have dead eyes and a predatory smile, was still in bed, her face hiding in the pillow. In retrospect, so many things should have crossed my mind. What was she playing at? Had this been me all along? Or was she playing games with me? Was this her way of mocking me? Was she trying to replace me? My mind had gone completely blank, though. I was incapable of comprehending what was happening before my eyes, and I felt like throwing my cell phone against the wall, not to have to look at it. I tightened my grip around it instead and kept my wet eyes on the screen, looking at my own twisted face, waiting to see what was about to happen. A moment later, she slithered back, then around the bed in slow motion. She lied down beside me until her body disappeared behind mine, as though she had merged with my mattress. I didn't want to look. The bedroom door was right there, and I should have gotten up and run out of my apartment screaming for help. But I didn't, because at that very moment, I felt her breathing against my neck. Her breath was cold and sent a chill down my spine. I snapped my head around and saw her teeth, only inches from my face. I couldn't even tell you whose face she was wearing because I couldn't look away from them. Up close, they looked sharper than ever, and I could see that there were endless rows of them as she opened her jaws wide enough to swallow my whole head. She pounced at me, one of her sharp teeth scratching my chin. Though the touch was soft, it was sharp enough to open a deep wound. Finally, I screamed and recoiled, falling off the bed and dragging myself to a corner. I don't think I've ever been more terrified in my entire life. I can't say what she did after that. The tears in my eyes made my vision blurry, and I buried my face in my hands, as if that alone could save me from her. She didn't attack me, though. Over the hoarse sounds of my screams, I could hear her laugh. Not a cruel laugh, an amused one. My hysteric shouting and crying were delightful to her. Worst of all, she laughed in my own voice. I don't know how long I stayed in that corner, completely lost and afraid. I just know that she vanished at some point, and not long after that, 2 armed policemen broke into my apartment, called in by my worried neighbor. What happened after that was a blur. I know they brought the paramedics when they saw the state I was in, and then they called Tarek, who was still my emergency contact. I suppose I tried to explain the whole thing, but my explanations probably sounded like the ramblings of a lunatic person. She had my face, I think I told them at some point. She came to me and she had my face and she tried to eat me. I'd never seen Tarek cry until that moment, but seeing me like that must have been too much for him because he completely broke down. "I should have stayed with you," he said, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Alicia. I shouldn't have left you there. You needed help." I think you can imagine what the police would have said if I'd shown them the video on my phone. They would have said it was only a hoax and that I was doing it for an attention. At best, the video of my insane face with eyes that were nothing like my own might have caused some doubt in Tarek's stubborn mind. But that's not what happened. You see, that recording doesn't exist. I don't have an explanation for that. The moment I tried to find it again, it simply wasn't in its folder. It had never existed. I told the police to check the nanny cam. It had a memory card. They told me the nanny cam wasn't even charged. The apparition, I stopped calling her Karen, came to me in the hospital every time I dozed off and then opened my eyes. It came to me in Tarek's apartment, too. Now it comes to me in my childhood bedroom, where I wait while my mother makes arrangements. Tarek is staying in the guest room. He said he wants to see me off, make sure I get the care that I need. Despite everything, I think he still loves me, and that breaks my heart. They're driving me to a psychiatric hospital in the morning. I've chosen to be committed. I hope I'm insane. I really, really do. But I'm not holding my breath. I've tried doctors before and nothing came of it, but this is my last hope. Besides, I believe my apparition is going to be quite amused. That's one thing to come out of this. I think I've figured out what she wants. I don't think she's feeding off my fear. I think she wants to have fun with me. I think that as long as I keep her entertained, she will continue to come and laugh at my misfortune. That's why every morning, even though I feel too broken to even react to her anymore, I still try to cover my eye. Cry, startle, do anything to show her that she's getting a reaction out of me. I hope she's amused because when she grows bored of me, I don't think she'll just move on to the next victim. I don't think she'll simply put me aside like a rag doll she's grown tired of. I'm sure that she's going to try every trick in her book to terrify me. And when I become too jaded to amuse her, she won't just let me go. For as long as I can, I'm going to keep crying and screaming because I've seen those teeth up close. And I have a scar on my chin that is evidence of what they can do. Those teeth are not just for show. So quoth this raven. Thank you again for writing Ambition and letting me read this story. Many of you are interested in a sequel, and here it is. Thank you so much for coming, my darlings. It means so much to me. And a big thank you to my Patreon supporters, Ermin Case, Darren and Jennifer, and Laura. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.